So here's a question for you. Why would a company spend billions buying a studio and then seemingly have no idea what to do with one of the biggest franchises they just acquired? Because that's exactly what happened with Stargate. Back in 2022, Amazon spent around $8.5 billion buying MGM, and one of the biggest jewels in that acquisition was Stargate, a franchise with a loyal fan base, multiple television series, movies, hundreds of episodes, a universe that had already proven it could survive for more than a decade. Then nothing. Years of rumours. Talk of revivals. Talk of continuations. Talk of reboots. Then eventually cancelled. Gone. Finished. At least for now. But here's the thing. I don't actually think the cancellation is the interesting part. The interesting part is this. I'm not convinced modern streaming executives ever really understood Stargate in the first place. Because if you look at what made Stargate successful, and then compare it to how modern streaming television is made, the two philosophies couldn't be further apart, and that might explain why Stargate never made it back through the gate. One of the strangest things about modern entertainment is how often people misunderstand successful franchises. They look at the result, not the process. They see 10 seasons of SG-1, 5 seasons of Atlantis, a loyal fan base that still exists decades later, and they assume the secret was bigger effects, bigger budgets, bigger spectacle. But that wasn't the secret at all. Stargate was remarkably simple. You had a team, you had a gate, you had a new world every week. That was basically it. The formula wasn't complicated, the magic came from execution. The audience wanted to spend time with these characters. Jack O'Neill, Daniel Jackson, Samantha Carter, Teal'c. The stories mattered, the lore mattered, but the characters came first. You weren't turning up every week because the galaxy was ending. You were turning up because you wanted to see what SG-1 got themselves into next. And that's a very different approach from a lot of modern streaming television. This is where things start getting interesting, because modern streaming services are obsessed with something called broad appeal. The goal is simple: appeal to everyone. Young viewers, older viewers, men, women, casual audiences, hardcore fans, everyone. Sounds sensible, doesn't it? Except there's a problem. When you try to make something for everyone, you often end up making something for no one. Stargate never became successful because it appealed to everybody. It became successful because it knew exactly what it was: military science fiction, exploration, ancient technology, alien civilizations, teamwork, adventure. It wasn't trying to be every genre all at once. It wasn't desperately chasing every demographic. It found its audience. Then it grew naturally. That's how loyalty is built. Not through focus groups, not through spreadsheets, and definitely not through executive buzzwords. People became Stargate fans because Stargate knew what Stargate was. What a concept. And I want to say this, because the next sentence is important. When it's done right, concept is king. And that brings me to my biggest worry about a Stargate revival, is budget. Now that sounds ridiculous. Usually people want bigger budgets, more money, more effects, more spectacle, but there's a point where bigger stops helping and starts hurting, because massive budgets create massive fear. Think about it. If a studio spends $200 million on a season, every decision becomes political, every risk becomes dangerous, every creative choice gets questioned. Everyone wants guarantees, and guarantees don't exist. Meanwhile, classic Stargate wasn't trying to be the most expensive show on television. It relied on writing, character chemistry, ideas, world building, sometimes a forest in Canada pretending to be an alien planet, and somehow it worked. In fact, some of Stargate's most beloved episodes aren't giant action spectacles. They're character episodes, comedy episodes, experimental episodes, episodes where the writers simply had fun. Could something like Window of Opportunity even get made today? Honestly, I'm not sure, because modern executives often seem terrified of slowing down and letting characters breathe. This might be the biggest issue of all. Stargate wasn't built around a chosen one. It wasn't built around a single superstar. It wasn't built around one character saving the universe every week. It was a team, a genuine ensemble, and that's surprisingly rare these days. Everyone contributed something. Jack brought leadership, Daniel brought knowledge, Carter brought science, Teal'c brought experience and perspective. Nobody could do everything. Everybody mattered, and that's what made the dynamic work. You weren't just watching one hero drag everyone else through the story. Instead, you were watching a group of capable people solve problems together. That teamwork is what keeps people coming back to the show. The chemistry feels genuine. The friendships feel genuine. The humour feels genuine. And I'm not sure that's something you can measure on a corporate spreadsheet, because chemistry isn't an algorithm. It's something audiences either feel or they don't. It's that simple. Here's something else Stargate understood. Not every episode has to save the universe. I know, crazy concept. These days, everything has to be the biggest thing ever. Every season, every finale, every threat. The fate of existence hangs in the balance, again and again and again. After a while, it becomes exhausting. Stargate often kept things smaller. A mystery through the gate, a diplomatic problem, an archaeological discovery, a scientific puzzle, a first contact scenario. And because these stakes were often smaller, the bigger stories felt bigger when they arrived. The Goa'uld mattered because the show spent years building them up. The replicators mattered because they earned their terrifying reputation. And the Ori mattered because they represented a genuine escalation. The universe expanded naturally, not because some executive in a boardroom demanded a bigger finale. And here's the part that makes me laugh. Amazon wants loyal subscribers. Every streaming service does. They want audiences who stick around for years. People who become emotionally invested. People who keep coming back. That's exactly what Stargate created for decades. And yet the very systems modern corporations use often make it harder to create that kind of loyalty. Because loyalty takes time. World building takes time. Characters take time. Trust takes time. Stargate wasn't built in a quarter. It wasn't built for a quarterly earnings report. It was built episode by episode, season by season, year by year. That's why people still talk about it. That's why people still rewatch it. And that's why people still want more. So when I look at Stargate, I don't see a franchise that failed. I see a franchise that succeeded so well that modern corporations don't quite understand how it happened. They want the fan base, they want the loyalty, they want the longevity, but I'm not convinced they want to follow the blueprint that actually made those things work. And maybe that's the real problem, not just for Stargate, but for a lot of modern science fiction, because sometimes the answer isn't bigger budgets, bigger effects, or bigger marketing campaigns. Sometimes you just have to remember why people fell in love with it, and that's a lesson Hollywood seems determined to keep ignoring. But what do you think? What was the real secret behind Stargate's success? Was it the characters, the humour, the world building, the exploration, or something else entirely? And if Stargate ever does return, would you want a continuation, a complete reboot, or would you rather they leave it alone? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, leave a like, subscribe, and check out the other Stargate videos on the channel, because something tells me this particular piece of nonsense isn't finished yet.